This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. I am so excited about A Stone's Throw and the wonderful feedback that it's getting now that it's out in the world. And I wanted to have a book club, a virtual event to celebrate and share and also connect with and hear from readers. So a little taste. Dee Donovan, senior reviewer at Midwest Book Review, writes, beautifully rendered and astute in its contrasts and insights. A Stone's Throw is a top pick for readers interested in art, motherhood, and relationships, both connected to and challenged by circumstance, trauma, and recovery. So if that sounds like your kind of a book, grab a copy, read it, join me on December 9th for an author chat and a real book club roundtable conversation. I want to hear your questions, your feelings, and your insights about this book. You can register at wordessential.com/events or just look in the show notes below this episode. One attendee will win a signed paperback copy of the book, and I hope it's you. Today, we continue our conversation at the Storyworks Roundtable with author Ben Hawken. So if you haven't listened to his first episode, 307, make sure you check that out. In this episode, we pick up where we left off and we talk about looking for the next story, processing ideas, writing dialogue, and getting characters into conversation as fully formed people, as well as some other cool stuff. So without further ado, here's part 2 of our conversation with Ben Hawken. Yeah, was this a lifelong ambition, or is it something you never thought about until the night of that concert when the story downloaded into your brain?
Yeah, I I was actually telling someone this just the other day about there was one previous time a decade earlier where I thought I probably should write a book. Now, also not I just thought of it and I started writing and I got halfway through, or probably halfway, 2/3 of the way through a page, and I reread it and I was like, oh, this is the final scene of a movie I've seen recently. Like, I know exactly what this is. Like, and also I don't know anything about the setting at all. Like, I better do some research. And then my third thought was, you're not going to do this right now. And that was the totality of my novel writing career. And when this idea came along, I was plenty busy with a lot of other things. And I've always been the type to immediatly, when an idea pops off at work or something like that, and there's a really cool opportunity, like I said before, striking while the iron is hot and just go down that rabbit hole immediately. Let's pursue this. Let's finish it. Let's get it published. Let's put it up on screen and let's pat ourselves on the back. It was just go, go, go with career stuff. And which is how people with careers talk about their careers, as they call it career stuff. Did you see my update on career stuff on LinkedIn? Yes. And so with the book, it was the same way. Once I had that idea, I just went after it right away. And I was fortunate to be able to start cutting out distractions right and left.
Yeah. So are you working on another book? Is this, we introduced the topic as career shift. So are you going full-time novelist now? Part-time novelist? What does it look like?
So I did a lot of thinking towards the end of the second rewrite of this book to be, okay, what's the next step here? And the book ends in such a way that there is not a sequel. Like, it doesn't end poorly necessarily. I mean, I guess that's up to the reader to decide, but I feel the story is told when you get to page 528 in the novel Chandelier, available now on Amazon and benhawken.com. So now it's a matter of what's the next one. And as I've started to sketch out a couple of ideas for the next book, now I begin to face, geez, there's a couple themes in this outline that are way too similar to this one. Like, I don't want to be the guy who has 2 novels about the ephemeral nature of time and how mathematics don't explain why it can only flow in one direction. I don't want to write 2 books about that. I think it was hard enough to write one. So now it is, I don't think I need to be choosing titles by theme, but it is, what's another topic that will grip me in the same way that this one did, because I was fascinated every single page. Once again, because your children are always beautiful, I get that, but it also just the way I found myself caught up in the story in such a way that when I'd eat dinner at the end of the day, or especially like on a weekend when I'd had a chance to write for a few hours that day, and I would sit down with my kids and they'd be talking about what they had done. And then I would say, you guys aren't going to believe what happened. So this thing occurred, and all of a sudden all these people were there, and they'd stop me and they'd be like, are you talking about a real thing? Or is this a book? I was like, yes, but you have to understand, like, I spent my life with these people, right? They were that present in my mind. And so I think a lot of writers are going to feel the same, that if you're going to devote this much time and energy, you have to find what is that next story that is going to take you along with it as well. And that's what I am pursuing now.
So you had the proverbial lightning strike with the first book, and now you're looking for the next story.
Oh, I'm hoping for another lightning strike. I mean, if
just putting that out there to the universe, right?
I'm just waiting for it to get rainy outside so I can run around with a piece of sheet metal over my head like Homer Simpson. That's what I'm really hoping for. But I might have to do this the old-fashioned way and actually plot out a story from start to finish. I watched like 13 master classes on novel writing in between like my second and third draft to take a break. And they were all there's a lot of really mechanical instruction about like going through that Homeric structure of like, what's your situation? What are the stakes? How do you time crunch this? How do you ratchet tension like chapter after chapter? And I'm like, listen, John Grisham, it's not that easy for the rest of us. And is a sentence I said once while listening. And it may just end up being that more mechanical. And if I do it that way, then that's a whole other conversation we can have in 3 years when I finish that one.
Yeah. So, Kathryn, I want to hear your thoughts on lightning strike versus finding the story, because I think this is a problem all writers faced, whatever your form, right? Whether you're an essayist, a short story writer, a novelist, you have certain moments where, eureka, I found it. And then the rest of the time, you're just like, I got to massage this thing into existence from nothing, And you've probably had this experience with your work and other forms of writing too, Ben, right? Like speech writing. Sometimes it's just there and it's flowing, and other times you're working really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, writing is a job a lot of the time. Yeah. But sorry, Kathryn, I interrupted.
No,
Please go.
You're good. Well, I think you've already kind of spoken to this where you said, you bring lots of ideas to the table and not all of them make it. And I feel like that's where I live most of the time, is I really have to work to develop an idea. I might get an inspiration. It's definitely, I don't know that I would describe very many of my ideas as lightning strikes. I don't get like massive amounts. I'll get like a character or a scene or a problem. And then I have to start spitballing and throwing things at the wall to make it work. And a lot of times I'll find connections or things where I can start mashing ideas together, which is really fun. But yeah, I think it's that it is work, right? And your lightning strike ideas are kind of a little more one-off than, or at least in my life, and a lot of the writers that I hang out with.
Yeah. And there was also, but what you said there makes me think about the process that I work through here, which is that first draft. I have a note here somewhere where I actually kept track of like what dates, like version 2, version 3, version 4 were all completed on. And, that first draft came together in a fairly straightforward way, but it was 200 pages long, and the final one was 600 pages long. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, Kathryn, to what you just said, that you're getting a lot of things down just to get the ideas out and to kind of have your beginning, middle, and end and a conclusion on that first draft. But then after the first draft, it was the second and third rewrites where the real work had to get started. How, hey, this is not a fully developed idea here. We have to really do some work. Like, it is work to sit and think and get those like little ideas, Kathryn, what you just said, that come here and there. And I would be driving in my car and I'd hear something on the radio and it would add to something you can tell what age I am listening to the radio, but like I would be listening to the radio, plus there'd be something I'd already been thinking about, and 3 stray lines of dialogue, or at least a back and a forth, or a question that could be posed, and a snappy response, or in some cases a very long response. It would be just that piece, and I'd be like, I know where that needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'd be going through other characters who would have a reaction, and it was a reaction that in context was still illogical because I hadn't explained enough about that person so that we could grasp their motivations. So, we talked about how that first draft came out so quickly, and there were some real lightning strikes, but Kathryn, you're exactly right. That lightning strike is a great starting point, but there is no lightning strike for 600 pages, right? It is work. You got to really do the emotional and the intellectual and rule of threes. Philosophical, who knows? But certainly the emotional and the intellectual work. And that is literal calories burned at your computer, making those ideas fully formed emotional concepts, and having a paragraph of exposition that is your reader is much better served by that being a conversation, that being dialogue, that being some back and forth. And that is work. And there is no fast way. As fast as I might type, there is no fast way through any of that. That is time and effort and focus.
Yep. I have a journal, and every time I like go dashing across the room, grab the journal and write in it, my husband will go, "Did you fix it?"
I love that. I love that. That is the exact same. That is me talking into my phone in traffic. Exactly. And isn't that the best feeling in the world, though? I mean, every writer will know how good that feeling is.
Yeah.
That is to me a number one, tier 1 best feelings.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of something a writer group and I were having a chat the other night, and the importance of timed daydream came up as we were talking, and you mentioned thinking while you're driving, and Kathryn getting that idea and dashing to the journal. And I think so much of our writing is processing, it's idea generation, it's making those connections in our minds before the words ever hit paper. And if we're always filling our brains with stuff, like the podcast, like the cute cat videos, like the whatever, the news, right? When we've always got stimulus coming at us from the world, I think we dramatically cut down on the amount of writing that we can do, on the amount of creativity we have, because our brains need to just sit, we need things to be happening kind of behind the curtain in our minds.
Yep. This year it was me watering my garden. It took me 35 minutes to water my garden every other day. And those 35 minutes were like the best daydreaming minutes.
Yeah.
Looking for expert support and a writing community? My Novel Journey coaching program is perfect for experienced novelists seeking mentorship and connection. Benefit from personalized guidance, detailed feedback, and a community that shares your passion for writing while getting the challenges writers face. Enhance your craft, achieve your writing goals, and confidently polish your novel. Join me now and take your writing to new heights. Go to wordessential.com/fiction coaching and schedule your free discovery call today. Love it.
And that is so critically important. I mean, Alida, you're exactly right. And someone who gets obsessive about it, like me, that was all the best stuff I ever came up with was when I had, either because there were family responsibilities, work responsibilities, the rule of threes, other types of responsibilities, is when I was taken all the way out of what I was writing, and I would hear a piece of a conversation, or my mind would be wandering. I mean, if you know anyone who's ever been really serious about what's a sport they're playing, they talk about cross training all the time. If you're trying to be a great runner, you've got to go ride a bike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're growing up, all the football players I knew they all had to wrestle during the off season to learn how to, throw people on the ground or something. And, those were, that types of cross training. And the further you can get away, or the more interests you can have outside of just being a writer. If you do triathlons, if you do dance, if you like pottery, if you are rappelling, I mean, name it. Those are bad examples, but examples nonetheless. The more interests you have further afield from what you're writing about, and that are not writing themselves, rule of threes, that is going to infinitely improve the work. I mean, and that's something that even career-wise, like there was a creative director I worked with early in my career who, when he saw one of his artists struggling to get something just right, he would literally put $20 in their hand and say, go watch a movie. Get out of this office for 3 hours, get lunch, come back, and then the first thing you draw 9 out of 10 times is going to be exactly what we need. And not everyone has that kind of boss. I've been fortunate to have some really good bosses in my career who have given me room to do things like that. But the principle is, put $20 in your own hand and get out of your head for a little while, because every time you do, you will come back with like 3 really good ideas. It's Charles Dickens taking a 4-hour walk every day, right? I mean, that's what he would do. And then he'd come back and write from like 8 to midnight. And it works. I mean,
yeah.
If you want to write about, starving street urchin children in Victorian England, at least it really works. And yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. And I just want to circle back on that little keyboard you mentioned for the phone. I'm like, that's brilliant. I have to get that. So I want to remind people that's a big takeaway. And then also this idea of not writing and writing in our heads. Someone on that call mentioned a shower tablet. You know how you always get good ideas in the shower? And I knew there were waterproof, notebooks because I'm a kayaker, but I had never thought to put one in the shower, because I will be in the shower, get an idea, and by the time I get out to grab my phone, I've lost the idea.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So tiny keyboard, shower tablet, record notes on your phone while driving. So many great things. Get out, go for a walk. Kathryn, you look like you're just about to speak. Go.
No, I don't.
No. Okay. Well, we've kind of shifted into process here. And Ben, you've mentioned characters and dialogue. And one of the things you proposed to us for a topic was really listening to your characters when they speak to you. And I would love to just shift into that and hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of what I'm about to say, you can also get from reading Stephen King's book about writing called On Writing Appropriately. The first third of it is a memoir for him, and then the second 2/3 are basically a manual for how to write a novel. If you're a brilliant novelist, it helps, especially, but I think it also can work for anyone. And then anyone with a masterclass subscription, if you go and listen to David Mamet's class, which is, I think, almost 3 hours long, is also very, very good. All those masterclass sessions are not created equal, unless they want to send me a free subscription, in which case they're all equally brilliant. But there are some real ones that really, really stand out, and that's one of them. And I think that so much of that dialogue is the ideal replacement for just a paragraph or two of exposition to start with. But then also that dialogue is super helpful if you have an incredibly complex topic. So in the case of Chandelier, available now on Amazon and benhawken.com, there were a few places where I mentioned there were some scientific phenomenon that were important to the plot, but not so much that we were going to be going down this real deep rabbit hole and making it into some contemporary science fiction novel, because it is not that. But there are some times where there are physical phenomenon that are occurring and people need to understand why. And the reader comes along on that journey. Well, a paragraph of me breaking it down into consumable information after reading 29 articles online about it, and then regurgitating that for a non-technical audience. I'm assuming a non-technical audience will be greater than the technical audience reading it. That can get you so far, and a really talented writer can do a lot with that. The other thing you can do is have someone explain it to a child. And so I created a situation where that type of back and forth can occur, where a child it needs to be explained to them, and they are asking all the questions that I, as an adult, would still be asking about, like, well, why? Well, it's kind of like this, this, and this. And then you use a metaphor to help it lock into the mind of a child. And then the child asks another question, mixes the metaphor, and then you maybe have to back up and try again and explain it again. those are really valuable things to do with dialogue. But in terms of actually writing it itself, is when I see examples of dialogue that works on the page, but if you were reading it to someone, it wouldn't. It's the clearest indicator. This person never read their own stuff out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like they never did. Like it is brilliant on the page, but it is literally the rhythm of the syllables coming out of your mouth you'd never say it this way. You're just a great writer. And really good dialogue is usually not great writing. I mean, Aaron Sorkin can do both, but typically not, right? And there's a real matter of putting some of the. I take a lot of pride in having the sentences have a high polish more often than not, and I would go back and very consciously put some rough edges back in the dialogue. My great fear is that everyone sounds alike, and because it's one person writing everyone, and you got to keep everyone's consciousnesses in mind while you do it. But you can do a lot by just putting some of those rough edges back in. Like think about give yourself the empathy and the grace and the perspective to put yourself in that conversation. And if you had to talk to someone you really care about, a fellow adult in this case, how would you break this down for them? You'd probably say a lot of you knows and just and well and so hear me outs, things that you automatically clip all those extraneous words when you're writing. But real dialogue is a little bit ugly. And if you were describing this to someone, how would you do it? And that's your first draft. And then the second draft is, well, how would this person then do it? They would say things a little bit differently. And also in a conversation, you never explain everything. Like the really bad dialogue that you see in in fiction is where people say the opening paragraph is, two people sitting on a porch in rocking chairs on their ranch. And the husband says to his wife, I sure am glad we've been married 27 years and lived here on my father's ranch, which he built with his own hands. That never in history has someone said that, right? And so in your dialogue, you have to be really cognizant. As writers, you want to get it all out there and build the scene. But with dialogue, you have to be very, very strategic with what you leave out. What do you leave unsaid? Because sometimes you want people to fill in the gaps. You want them to get a sense of it without spoon feeding it to them. And other times, it's something you'll come back to later, and you can plant a seed, come back a chapter later. And then a lot of times in my book, there is a running theme of, is anyone ever telling you everything they know? Mm-hmm. And I think in most dialogue, you're not. Not because you're necessarily being deceptive, but because just who wants their whole everything in your head, you really want that out on the streets. And then secondly, we are also, I think, as human beings, just really, we are strategic and we are innately secretive, like not necessarily in nefarious ways, but just who says everything they're thinking. I mean, well, okay, we all know someone who says everything they're thinking, but but you don't like that person. So don't say everything. And just those two things, between put the rough edges back on and don't try to carry the entire narrative weight in a 2-page conversation. Just those things alone go a really long way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was just dealing with this with the character who's doing kind of like self-revelation through dialogue with 2 different characters. And she revealed one section of her backstory to one character because of the relationship she had with her, and a different set of her backstory to the other character. And it was natural. I love it. Because she's not going to tell them the same things, right? The same details don't matter. So yeah, I resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we talk. I mean, we really do selectively share information. So Kathryn, I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. David Mamet is, of course, renowned for dialogue and character voice. And once I heard Carrie Fisher remarking in an interview that one of the reasons actors really liked her scripts is because she writes dialogue the way people talk, as opposed to some of the lines she had to perform in Star Wars that were great on the page, but not natural sounding. And so then as an actor, she was taxed with trying to make this sound natural and put the performance behind those words, which was really challenging given the way some of those lines were written. And what you said about reading your dialogue out loud, you do know when writers don't read out loud, and we have narrative exposition and we have the role of the storyteller to craft all that beautiful prose, but then when your characters are speaking, it's verbal. It is performed, even if it's only, it's performed in the reader's mind. The reader's inner ear will hear it, and it communicates to us who this person is, who the character is. And even if you've got people where they're the same region, the same socioeconomic background, all those, things that can go into shaping like a dialect, for example, you still need those two people to sound distinct from each other because they're individuals, even with all of their similarities.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is one of the greatest challenges we face as writers writing dialogue.
And I love that point you make about how people need to sound unique within a conversation, and then be amongst their peers in the book, and then throughout, like chapter to chapter. Can they also not just be distinct, but then are they consistent within that distinctiveness? And one of the things that really helped me with the sections of dialogue I had in the book, especially when I was most of the dialogue in the book was not in the first draft, I'm ashamed to say, but as I went back and was adding it, it really was a matter of focusing on how do I say this? It was, there was a lot of, I wanted these people to be like unique entities when they were having these conversations, but then also, having a good sense of what their motivations were along the way. And I guess the third part of that then was in my outline, having that open space where I knew a conversation needed to happen, but I didn't have it yet, was as I was writing, if something sprung to mind that was a very provocative statement or a really unexpected thing that they might say, I went with it every single time. It didn't always make it into the final draft, but every curveball that someone could just pop out of someone's mouth, is that where curveballs come out of? Yes. Sure. Every curveball that could pop out of someone's mouth, I went with it on the page, because suddenly now, and we talked about this at the beginning, now that other character in the conversation had something really big to respond to. Is, in improv, comedians will tell you that when the person opposite you says something wild, that's a gift, because you get to react to that now. And so, so much of writing dialogue is that improv, right? And so go with all of your instincts, go with those wild ideas that might just happen to pop up, and then see where the conversation goes. If it doesn't work, you just delete 3 lines and pick up again. But be really open to how spontaneous your conversations can be, because when just the 3 of us talking, we don't know. Kathryn in a moment now could say the wildest thing imaginable, and Alida and I will react to that, and that'll be a great podcast. And give that same leeway to the dialogue that you're writing, because worst case scenario, you've spent 5 minutes and it just doesn't work out, and you back up to where you started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chase all those rabbits. Chase all those rabbits that pop up.
Definitely. You mentioned improv. It's like that rule, everything is a yes. You never say no to what comes your way. And I think one of the greatest lessons newer writers can absorb is to never, ever censor yourself. It's a draft. You've got revision coming. You can always rein it in. But if you cut something off while it's happening, while the inspiration is there, while the surprises are coming in, then you're not going to see what could come out of it. And so I love what you were saying about let those characters say those weird, ridiculous, surprising, offensive, whatever, because it's a character in a story in a certain context. Let it happen and get your other characters to react to it and see where it goes. Right?
Yeah. We got to remember your character.
You just said that like, well, duh.
No, you got to remember they're fully formed. You're forming them as much as you can as fully formed human beings, right? So they have their own emotional crud that they're dealing with at the same time as they're having this conversation with the other character, right? And this is like the same thing, like husbands and wives will be arguing about something on the surface and something else underneath, right? Because they had so many different experiences or things are going on, below the surface that affect the surface. And this is where, maybe as a writer, you're like, where did that come from? But if you really think about it, you're like, actually, I know exactly where that came from. It's because this is like this, and that's why she said that. And in this moment, that's what needed to happen, because we needed to have that conflict, or we needed to have that rub differently, or we needed to have this reaction. So.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And, and that is another thing that's going to add that level of realism to what we're writing. I mean, Kathryn, what you said, that if there is a motivation and then a sub-motivation and then an underlying tension, and as you can paint that picture for your audience, some very average dialogue can suddenly be really emotionally driven because they are they're along for the ride with those layers now. And so, adding that textural and textual depth is really, really important, and it does wonders for the emotional journey you're taking the people reading.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So this seems like a good place to wrap up the conversation. Are there any other thoughts about listening to our characters? Just need to get out there.
I don't think so. I mean, this is my favorite topic in the world, and I think I can't think of anything we've left out. This is awesome.
Well, I am so glad you were able to join us, Ben, and tell us, what is the title of your book and where can we find it?
So the title of my book, Chandelier, available now on Amazon.com. That's the one. And benhawken.com. That's HAWKEN. Because why is it spelled different than everyone else's with that last name? Don't know. Don't care. But, Ingram Spark, Barnes & Noble, if you want to read it, in the late 90s. And it is, and there's also a Kindle. And I'm recording the audiobook right now. In fact, I was just putting chapter 9 down on tape. There's no tape. I was recording chapter 9 earlier this morning. So I just have 34 more chapters to go.
Nothing.
But as read by the author, it's going to take forever. Another piece of advice: if you're an author and you want an audiobook, just upload it and have an AI do it. It'll be done in 4 minutes.
No,
or you can be like
that.
me in
Don't
my
do
basement with this microphone, just reading chapter 4
for 400 hours, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
I
many
think
hours.
that is what they say. I think they say, like, for every hour of audio, it's going to be 4 hours of recording and editing and processing. I think that's the rule that you're told.
So second tip: then you record your stuff in your basement, and then you go on Fiverr and you find a guy who is going to do it at an extremely competitive price, do all the audio mastering for you. That's what I've done. And if you have the financial bandwidth, and it's not that much, luckily, don't do all the editing yourself, folks. That sounds terrible. So, I mean, do you guys lay out your own novels? Do you guys do all the layout yourself, or do you have someone do that?
I've done my own layout, yeah. So I hire out the covers.
On all of them?
Yeah. So
that is so much work, Alida.
The craft books I hired out because there's graphic design. There was a lot of different types of formatting in the craft book. So yeah, those I hired out. The next one I may hire out. I may do myself. We'll see what my bandwidth is. But my novels, I do my own formatting and hire
a real artisan.
Designers to do the covers because I'm not a graphic designer. But yeah,
I did it backwards. I did the cover and then had a friend of mine help me finish it, and then I went on Fiverr again and found a graphic designer to help me with the layout, who did a great job on the layout. I was really happy with how it looked. But I did the opposite. So between the two of us, Alida, we could do a book.
We could totally do a book. We could, the three of us could open a press right now. We could.
I accept.
Have a small press running. Excellent. Coming soon.
Coming soon to nowhere near you.
That's right.
This project.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.